Alice Ackerman, the subject of 2018's Blumhouse production Cam, works as a popular camgirl, meaning she live streams erotic content in exchange for cash tips from online viewers. Alice escalates the extravagance of her shows in an attempt to increase her ranking on the site, until she's locked out of her account by her doppelgänger, who cams as Alice, taking the identity she'd expertly curated out of her control. Critic Andrew Parker of The Gate magazine writes that Cam buckles under its desire to be as edgy and nasty as possible, turning a film that could have said something constructive about the nature of sex work and online identities into just another dumb horror flick. Whereas Jordan Searles, writing for Bitch Media, says, the film walks a tight line between reality and fiction, landing somewhere in the middle by reaching real, societal truth within its deft genre trappings. These well-crafted reviews agree on many points. They both highlight the excellent performances by Madeline Brewer, who plays Alice, Lola, Alice's camgirl persona, and Fake Lola, the doppelganger that takes over her account. Both reviews applaud Cam's intriguing premise, and they both identify the film's surprisingly accurate portrayal of sex work. Yet, Andrew ultimately condemns Cam for plotting its runtime by making Alice endure a series of unfortunate events before the final reveal. He goes so far as to say that he's not convinced that Cam is half as empowering as it thinks it is. On the other hand, Jordan thinks this plotting illuminates the marginalization of the sex industry. Her takeaway is that the film reminds us that choosing between safety and employment is not a choice that sex workers should have to make. These two reviews are in conversation with one another. Cam tells a story that led critics to opposite conclusions amidst much agreement. Horror, too, is a decisive genre both from a production angle and audience reception. In the recent horror landscape, popular films have led to never-ending series of sequels that, although often very financially successful, lack the fervent followings of the originals. Due to the relative low cost of producing horror, the genre has simultaneously been milked for every penny and embraced by independent filmmakers. Blumhouse, along with other studios, have funded many low-budget horror films, frequently with overt political messaging. Some of the topics in horror films are viewed as too avant-garde for larger studios, but the potential for horror to explore taboo topics is infinite. As media scholar Robin Woods writes, the true subject of the horror genre is the struggle for recognition of all that our civilization represses or oppresses, its reemergence dramatized, as in our nightmares, as an object of horror, a matter for terror. Cam falls into the molding of a Blumhouse production, and has a reported budget of only $1 million, and its creators Issa Mays and Daniel Goldhager state that the film was created with the intent of making its audience empathize with a sex worker. Issa wrote much of the film calling on her experience as a camgirl. Initially, she approached Daniel about filming a documentary on the subject. That documentary shapeshifted into a horror film. Savannah Teague, in her thesis American Horror Film and Metacinema, writes that, more than any other genre, horror tends to fall within a metacinematic tradition, meaning that a film's plot or character are in some way self-referential to the genre, and rely upon audiences' pre-existing knowledge. For Cam, the audience, who will hereby be known as we, needs two sets of cultural understandings to fully appreciate the film's meta-narratives. 1. We need to be aware of the film industry's sexualization and objectification of females. And 2. We need to grasp the societal stigma to sex work. With these basic understandings, we can examine Cam as a provocative take on feminist horror. Now, Cam isn't asking to be feminist. Its politics are conveyed primarily, if not exclusively, through representation, and its treatment of character rather than soapboxing an ideology. But as a horror film, Cam's refusal to judge Alice for her occupation can't be separated from horror's historical misogyny. As critic Lena Wilson writes, in many ways, feminist horror is an oxymoron. As a genre founded on objectifying, degrading portrayals of sexual and physical violence against women, horror can induce a sort of feminist queasiness in any cognizant viewer. In slasher films such as Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street, the rampant killer punishes women for premarital sex. With horror's affinity for gore and subsequent R rating, many films include gratuitous shots of scantily clad women, often before their untimely death. But Lena continues. Yet horror's elasticity, its playful waltzes along the boundaries of reality, make it the only genre in which some of the most important, outre displays of feminist storytelling are possible. Through representation, Cam dances this waltz to perfection. Issa wanted Cam to show us that sex work is work. In fact, the film presents Alex's camming as a small business she runs. We see multiple shots of Alice turning through her calendar, which is filled so thoroughly with color-coded reminders and post-it notes that any soccer mom would be envious. She has a patronage of adoring fans. She's making enough money that she purchases a $4,000 couch, presumably for her setup. Her job can be physically and emotionally demanding. One of Alice's camgirl friends says that she cammed 70 hours this week and my rank hasn't budged. Alice's obsession with her rank on Free Girls Live, the camming site used throughout the film, illustrates the world of camming is just as competitive and cutthroat as any corporate career. After eating a raw steak live pushes Alice's ranking into the top 50, Princess X, a fellow camgirl who is known for doing non-nude shows, says she'll get naked if her audience can drop Alice 10 places in the ranking. In writing the character Alice, Issa wanted to channel the lead characters of 2010's Black Swan and 2014's Whiplash. Both these movies feature extremely talented, extremely motivated performers willing to go to the ends of the earth to perfect their craft. YouTube creator Lessons from the Screenplay compared these movies, stating,
"From the first shots of Whiplash and Black Swan, we see the protagonists immersed in their respective disciplines."
Yep, that's true for Cam.
Both of these films bring us behind the scenes of a world most people never get to see.
I think most people won't ever cam model.
Both were relatively low budget,
Cam's the lowest of the three.
leaned heavily on their scripts,
Issa and Daniel basically wrote the script while they directed it mentally.
and led to Oscar wins for great performances.
Okay, that's where the comparison ends. In an interview with Dan Schindel of Hyperallergenic, Issa says that nobody questions Andrew's desire to drum, same as no one questions why Nita needs to dance. Issa strived for the film to elicit this same feeling about a sex worker. For Alice, camming isn't merely her job, it's also her preferred method of artistic expression. Alice decorates the room she does shows in with a plush, neon pink aesthetic. The colors are oversaturated, the set is hyper-stylized. She uses a wide variety of costumes. From her calendar, it's clear she enjoys frequently experimenting with different types of shows and themes. Interacting with camgirls provides an anonymous way to interact with taboo fetishes. In its opening scene, Cam plays with the intertextuality of horror by having Alice's show depict the gruesome as sexual. She performs a suicide show, where a plant in the chat eggs Alice on to slit her throat, which she eventually does, after getting paid, of course. Then, Alice jolts up, pulls prosthetics from her neck, and seductively proclaims, "Gotcha." Alice is great at camming. She enjoys it. She's excited by it. All of this is female empowerment, or it should be, but Cam challenges us in indirect ways, because while Alice enjoys camming, it's not a particularly great industry to be in. As Andrew notes, Alice goes through hell. When Alice interacts with her fans in person, which happens with two separate guys, the meetings don't go well. Alice has lunch with Barney, an older customer who thinks of himself as the reason Alice is successful. Barney is very well off, which inflates his self-worth. He says, "What can I say? You girls love me." During their lunch date, Alice enters the restroom and he follows her. There, Barney asks for sexual favors before physically assaulting Alice. She escapes from his grasp by biting him. She literally bites the hand that metaphorically feeds her. Another customer, who goes by the username Tinkerboy, thinks of himself as a white knight. He tells Alice, "I'm your life helper." He extorts and lies to her. And when fake Lola takes over Alice's account, no one is particularly helpful. Her fellow cam girls are sympathetic, but not compelled to any assistance. Free Girl Live's customer service is unhelpful to Alice, especially considering her account is still streaming shows, so they're still profiting. Alice calls the police for help, but when she tells them about her situation, they are incredulous. One of the officers very creepily asks her how she gets paid, and what's the weirdest thing she's done. He implies that she's a prostitute. When she denies, he responds, "That's a shame." His interrogating her simultaneously threatens her with his authority as a cop, while suggesting he'd be interested in sexual favors. The other officer is merely dismissive, a saint in comparison. He tells her, if you don't want to deal with this stuff, get off the internet. As Jourdain identifies, there aren't proper laws in place protecting sex workers. The issues with the sex work industry can make us question why Alice is so insistent on getting back to camming. We might feel this way even if we didn't feel the same way about Andrew in Whiplash or Nina in Black Swan. Issa wants to challenge these internal biases we may have towards sex work. Princess Weeks, an assistant editor for The Mary Sue, writes that the question of whether a film is feminist horror boils down to, does this movie abuse women in a voyeuristic way, or is it using horror to speak to a unique terror that is connected to the female experience? In addition to its representation, Cam shows the horrors of the internet, especially as a woman. The terror of the internet is embodied by Alice's doppelganger, Fake Lola. Losing access to her account forces Alice to examine her relationship to her camming persona, Lola. Lola won't fake orgasms. She sells authenticity. It's a part of Lola's brand. Not only is fake Lola literally inauthentic, but she doesn't have any rules. She shows where Alice lives, tapping into the real fear of getting doxxed. And fake Lola even holds a picture of her younger brother up to the camera, a clear violation of his privacy which harms their real-life relationship. Fake Lola also participates in the arms race of ridiculousness, quite literally. She shoots herself on stream, only to reveal she was using prosthetics. She does all the shows Alice hasn't. Fake Lola is algorithmic. She cams almost non-stop. What's particularly devastating to Alice is that fake Lola climbs up the ranks on Free Girls Live with ease. Alice's online persona grows without her. Before her account was stolen, Alice is obsessed with moving up the ranks. She finds validation in her ranking and even self-worth. This is a pretty on-the-nose comparison to people finding validation in social media likes and views. But it's a layered metaphor. Like any online account or persona, it tries to be real, it sells authenticity, but it's never really real. Although having your online persona post, perform, or really do anything on its own seems less realistic, Issa says she based Fake Lola on an experience she had where one of her camming videos was reposted on Pornhub with her watermark removed. There was nothing showing it was her, she benefited in no way. The definite cause of Fake Lola is never explicitly revealed, but Alice discovers that she's not the only cam girl who has been taken over by a projection. This vaguity is far scarier than if the film had gotten into the specifics. This explanation is also eerily premonitioned, as the film was already in production when deepfakes, a technology that uses a collection of footage to synthetically put one person's likeness on another's body, became popularized. Deepfakes is now primarily known for its use in pornography. It suggested that Alice's cam site, FGL, likely in cahoots with avid cam watcher Tinkerboy, created Fake Lola. FGL owns all of the cam girls' footage and gets half the profits from their shows. The site doesn't need to pay its cammers if they aren't really camming. Although FGL provides cam girls with an avenue to safely profit off their sex work, Cam shows the dangers of a large company in an unregulated industry in relation to its largely powerless gig employees. Cam has a unique take on filming the internet as well. 2014's Unfriended, and the subsequent film series, popularized a subgenre of horror where the entire film takes place in video calls. This genre has been revitalized with the societal reliance on such calls in the COVID-19 pandemic, most notably with 2020's Host. The video call / text scenes in Cam use a variety of filming techniques to make the expansive wasteland of the internet utterly claustrophobic. For one, phone screens are horizontal, so that only part of the screen is visible, which utilizes the horror filming technique of restricting the lens of vision. It's an uncanny valley effect where we know the screen is too close. When fake Lola goes live, we hear the notification bell from her phone as diegetic sound. It's upbeat, mystical, contrasting Alice's fear. In exploring which other camgirls appear to be fakes, Alice's screen cuts to further close-ups. Here, there's a quick, decelerated zoom. On the library desktop computer, the shots move between showing the full screen to restricted scrolling, to targeted close-ups that move on rhythm with the music. The words Alice reads blur as the image pans left to right. We can only pick up some of the content as if we're reading the cliff notes of the scene. When Alice eventually talks to fake Lola, the shots aren't restricted to the laptop screen either. In this scene, we see shots of the full computer screen, just Alice's cam, just fake Lola's cam, and Alice from a camera angled from above the laptop. In discussing the misogynistic lineage of horror, it'd be wrong to ignore depictions of female nudity. By necessity, Cam uses nudity in multiple scenes. These instances can, on first thought, put a cloud over the film's feminist messaging. As Savannah writes in her thesis, many horror fans have to confront the elements of the genre that are problematic, and that creates a conflict between enjoyment and awareness, knowing that something is problematic and feeling the need to reconcile that conflict between knowing and enjoying. But to say female nudity is inherently problematic is regressive, and quite reminiscent of the same male-centric logic used by school administrators to enforce dress codes on girls so that boys don't get turned on. Distracted. Nudity is integral to the world of camming. The production team worked tirelessly to make sure none of the nudity is gratuitous. Actress Madeline Brewers had final discretion on each nude scene. In fact, the climatic scene between Alice and fake Lola was intended to have Alice stripped nude. Production stopped for 45 minutes as Madeline explained to Daniel and Issa that the nudity was out of her character. They changed the scene, and the creators now believe that doing otherwise would have been a huge mistake. Cam succeeds in speaking to horror. It asks us to reject our biases, all the while telling a story of female artistry and sexuality in a modern horror setting, the internet. All of which centers on us accepting that Alice wants to be a cam girl. We need to accept that she has agency and that she should decide what she does. As Issa puts it, the scary part of the film is Alice's loss of agency, her loss of control over her own image, and that's only scary if you recognize that she had agency in the first place.